Never judge a person by the worst choices they made in life. There's something special and holy in people's soul, and that's what you should try to connect with. And that's what you should always judge people favorably. And you will never necessarily know what they've been through to get in the position they are. Even if they rub you the wrong way, even if you don't condone actions or political ideologies or whatever it is, judge people favorably, judge people how you would want to be judged. And remember that Hashem doesn't just operate off of strict justice.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome once again to the Changemakers series, a series of one-on-one talks with none other than Robert Katz. The series hopes to inspire each and every person who participates to make a difference in a positive way, to inspire each and every person to realize that they can make a difference in a positive way. Tonight we have the honor of hosting a very special guest, Yehudah Pryce. To say an illustration of the power of positive change is an understatement. It truly is an inspiring story, and I hope that there is much inspiration drawn from this experience and that many will feel even more enthusiastic to do more good for themselves and certainly for others. We'd like to get right into this as soon as possible. So without further ado, Rob.
Thank you, Rabbi, and a warm welcome to our guests, literally from all over the world for the show. For those joining for the first time, a special warm welcome. And for those who have joined before, and for our new time guests, just a bit of formality. The Q&A is open. Please feel very, very free, and we most welcome chats and comments, questions. To the extent that the questions are relevant and topical, we will make every endeavor, as we always do, to pose the question. So the Q&A is open, and please feel very, very free to use it. To our very, very special guest, Yehudah, a warm South African welcome. Yehudah, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, I'm doing well. How are you?
Thank God, Yehudah, thank God, and much, much, much appreciated. I know that we didn't have a lot of time before we asked you and you accepted. So, I'd just like to sincerely thank you for being so open and willing to come on our show. Thank you.
No problem, and I appreciate the opportunity. Where I came from, I never necessarily knew that I would be able to share my voice or that anybody would want to hear it. So I appreciate that.
No. We at the southern tip of Africa and worldwide most certainly want to hear your voice, Yehudah. We're really, really looking forward to it, and we really want to. But before we get on to the interview, Yehudah, I really just, it would be remiss of me not to thank two people. Number one is Paul Wayburn, and number two is Craig Sachs. Paul and Craig, thank you so much for getting us to this point. We really, really do appreciate your help in getting to it. Yehudah, let's start the discussion with you. You grew up in the US. Can you describe your early childhood to us, where you grew up, and what was life for what was then Omar Pryce growing up?
Okay, yes. I grew up in Orange County, California, Southern California. It's not too far away from Los Angeles. Grew up in a town that I essentially would say middle class. Now, it had its pockets of poverty around it. And just to illustrate why I will count it as middle class, my mother's house has been shot up, her vehicle been shot up, robbed on multiple occasions. My friend was chased down and executed down the street. So middle class, definitely, but obviously it had some elements in there that could be difficult to contend with. My mother immigrated from Sri Lanka, and my father immigrated from Jamaica. I didn't have really an extended family out here, so it was just them and myself. They divorced at the age of 2, so I was raised by my stepdad. My stepdad had actually happened to be white, and so my siblings presented and looked as white. So that there was different racial issues, and not in my household particularly, but around the neighborhood. So I've been in neighborhoods where I was accosted with the N-word and harassed in my neighborhood. And so I dealt with that, and I also dealt with what is my identity as a black boy at the time, with this household dynamic that is not typical of your normal black boys, and then also dealing with outside racism that I had to contend with. For me, uh, I thought the flip side of hate, like explicit hate or racism that I got accosted with, the flip side of that, of pity, was kind of the same thing for me. Whether you hate or just had a whole bunch of pity on me for merely existing as a black person or whatnot. This is how I at least perceived it when I was a child. And so I kind of felt like, well, I don't want you to pity me. Let me do my own lane and find out my own self what it is. And I went and did that. And I gave reason, if you're going to hate me for being black, for whatever it was, I actually had a reason why you could hate me, because I was participating in this particular lifestyle, this criminal lifestyle. And so I liked that, and I embraced it. And it gave me a sense of power. It gave me a sense of self-efficacy. I felt like I belonged, and I felt like I had an ability to exhibit some sort of power, some sort of self-determination. And as a child, to me, it felt good. I didn't necessarily visualize myself as what I could be in the future and what it would take to achieve that in the future. So the immediate gratification of doing whatever I wanted to get whatever I wanted, it appealed to me, and I felt like I was cool. And I think the bottom line, when you're dealing with children, gang members, or people who are attracted to that particular lifestyle, I think there's that feeling of coolness, right? That, for a lack of a better word, you feel cool, you feel powerful, you feel popular, at least in the subculture you are. And so that was kind of what typified my childhood growing up.
Yehudah, when you, after describing this childhood, what made you decide to get involved in gangs? When? How? What was or was it an evolution into a gang? What happened?
Yeah, I think the word would be an evolution. So while I never claimed specific gang membership to a particular gang, all my friends were gang members. So I wouldn't say there was a qualitative difference between me and my friends. I actually liked the appeal of being a free agent gangster, is what I called myself, because I had friends from so many different gangs, which also facilitated me committing crime, whether it's dealing drugs. My main MO was to rob drug dealers, because I figured, okay, they can't really call the police. They actually did. They would end up saying that it was legal property stolen, but that was at least what I thought of when I was doing it, which was to rob drug dealers or all that. But when you're dealing with the criminal lifestyle, criminal subculture, the people who run it are gang members. In Southern California, it's Bloods, it's Crips, and just 30 minutes away in South Central Los Angeles, that was actually the birthplace of the Bloods and Crips. And so we have this strong gang culture. And if you're going to be anybody in this subculture, you either were from a gang or you were very close with gang members, and you were able to be tough and be able to survive in this particular realm. And so my introduction to it would probably be, I would say, around the age of 13 years old. And I did a lot of socializing too in Long Beach, in South Central Los Angeles, and that's what I would call my stomping grounds as far as where my criminal endeavors, so to speak, led me to. And so I felt the epitome of cool or gang lifestyle was in these particular neighborhoods. So that's what I gravitated towards.
Yehudah, how old were you when you first started to get involved in gangs, and how long did this last before you were eventually arrested, and what actually led to your conviction?
Okay, so I would say around the age of 13, again, it wasn't a particular moment or a particular event that happened. It was kind of an evolution, as Rob mentioned. And in whatever crime, I like to tell people, it wasn't necessarily what I did or didn't do. I participated in a culture and a lifestyle that condoned almost every crime you could imagine. So in a way, I was complicit. If it wasn't in my own particular actions, it was in what I supported or what I thought was an acceptable ethical stance or position or values. I had integrity towards the criminal ethos. And so that started at age 13, and it led to me going to juvenile hall on several occasions. As I mentioned, I was 16 years old when my mother's house was shot up. My 10-year-old sister's in the house, 11-year-old brother in the house, my family in the house. When my mother's vehicle was shot up, when I was going in and out of juvenile hall for various cases. So that was my experience. And then at the age of 19, I was arrested for a robbery. Nobody was physically hurt, but the way that the charges are levied in California, at least at the time, were that I got 4 years for a robbery, 10 years for a gang enhancement, because it was done for the benefit of the gang, is how they charged it, and that a gun was displayed, so that was another 10 years. So I was sentenced to a total of 24 years in prison for my first offense as an adult. And so that's what pretty much started me on this particular journey.
So, Yehudah, you've now described a 24-year sentence, correct?
Yes.
And in listening to you before, you actually said that you were sentenced to a 24-year prison term before you even 24. So you were sentenced to more prison time than you'd been alive on earth. So I've got two questions I want to ask. Number one, first question is, how did you feel as a human being, as a young man, less than 24, being sentenced to more prison time than you are alive? And then I'll ask the second follow-up question just once you've answered that one.
Oh, well, actually, that's exactly how I framed it in my own mind when I was in jail. I thought to myself, well, wait, hold up. I didn't kill anybody. Why am I being sentenced for more time than I've been alive and essentially a quarter century in prison? First time in an adult jail. So for one, you would imagine that some sort of sentence like that would elicit some sort of self-reflection of what I've done wrong in life. It definitely did not. What it did is it built up a certain animosity against how I perceived the system to be against me, that they would write off my whole life for the poor choices I made. And don't get me wrong, obviously I was committing crimes, and obviously there was consequences to those crimes, and I should have been held accountable for it. But to think about it, 24 years, in the 24 years, I consider that love, because the judge, essentially, the DA was arguing for a life sentence. It's based on gang enhancement with the crime, and that's what you could charge with. And the judge was who said that, you know what, you're young, you're smart, I'm just going to give you 24 years. And so not only did I get sentenced to 24 years, I was supposed to appreciate only being sentenced to 24 years, right? It's hard to appreciate. I guess, I was kind of ambivalent about that, but, like, oh, yes, you sentenced me more time than I've been alive, but it could have been life. But I had a lot of animosity. I had a lot of built-in animosity and resentment against a system that was supposed to be justice, right? And if you equate justice with just how much time you could lock a person away from his community, his family, and friends, that didn't sit well with me, especially my understanding as a 19-year-old child, I would say.
Yes. Yehudah, you made mention of the word adult jail. So how does a a 19-year-old child go into an adult jail? Now, I want to tell you something that about 15, 20 years ago, for our viewers, I used to go with one of the local rabbis here on call it chaplaincy visits to a jail outside Pretoria. And the first time I ever went, the rabbi actually said to me, the one thing that's going to surprise you is how ordinary these people are, average they are. Because I thought in my mind's mind, I'm going to a jail and I'm going to see people with bulging muscles, tattoo upon tattoo, whatever, like real, American movie kind of figures. And driving out, the rabbi was right. He said, these are the kind of guys that can sit next to you in shul and you wouldn't bat an eyelid. And that's exactly what I saw. And I must just tell you that the guys that we visited, one was up for attempted murder, others were up for tax fraud, others for drug dealing. It was a whole range. It wasn't just white-collar crime over here. So the question that I ask you is, going into the jail, what was it like? What was life in prison for a young 19-year-old Omar Pryce at the time?
Well, one, I would say, first off, at 19 years old, again, I wasn't even close to becoming a reformed man, or even thinking that I would live a regular life. I was very much embraced the criminal lifestyle. So that was what my thinking was. Being incarcerated didn't somehow lead to that particular change immediately. Going into jail, I kind of liked the atmosphere because I understood the rules. You responded in a certain way. You knew how to be respectful with certain people, and you knew that there would be repercussions, and that was a vice versa thing. And we understood the rules of the land, the criminal ethos that permeated the atmosphere there. So there was a lot of fights. There was a lot, and I don't know if people understand what California prisons, and I don't know how it is in any other state. I just know California prison, racial politics rules the jail system. So everybody's separated according to race. And if something happened between races, you were obligated to participate in the violence. Because if you did not, you would face the repercussions from your particular race. So that's just what it was. And just to give you an example, Southern Hispanics and whites would not eat food from a black inmate. And so if I opened up a bag of cookies in front of them, no. Now, if they open up that same bag of cookies in front of me, they could eat it. So that's how deep the racial politics were and the separation. So within that, right, there's a constant anxiety, because I started off 3 years in the county jail, which is a different sort of atmosphere. And then the first prison I went to was a maximum security 180 design level 4 prison. That's you can't get a higher security prison in California. And I went to the Pelican Bay. So Pelican Bay is known for being notoriously violent and all that. And so, yeah, there's, survival responses that you have to build to survive in prison. It's rough. There's despair. You're locked away from your family, your friends, your ability to dream about actually doing something with your life. You can dream about it, but how tangible is it? Especially somebody who's been arrested as a teenager, and then essentially they're telling me in 24 years, then you can start your life. I've never really lived before then. So it's kind of like, how do I imagine that and picture that? So there's a lot of despair, a lot of separation, and you realize that everybody else that you may have known, they're just living their life, and time's not stopping, just stopping for me. So there's a lot of despair. You mentioned something, though, that a lot of these people arrested or in jail, they could be just normal people sitting by you in shul. And it's totally, I remember when my wife at the time, or she wasn't my wife, was visiting me in prison, and she was she had a lot of trepidation about doing her first, prison visit. She's from Canada, Vancouver, Canada. So she doesn't necessarily know anything about, California prisons. I'm glad she didn't. But so she went, and then when she got there, she's like, "Oh, everybody's so happy and everybody's so nice." But you could imagine, right, when you're not in this environment where it's just racial politics and survival, where you have to be kind of hard, you kind of have to work on those bulging muscles and those tattoos all over your arms and your face and neck. A lot of tattoos, and people like to cover their face. It's kind of it's kind of peculiar, but it's a thing, right? And you could understand it's for intimidation, and it's kind of, you got to be hard as nails. But when people are around their family, their friends, right, they're just cuddly teddy bears, So to know that humanness, that kindness is inside of them, to know that I think it could put things in perspective, that people are not just who they are in their worst particular circumstances, that there's another side to them. And that's kind of the side you may want to look for.
Yehudah, we want to come back to these points, the experience of actually being in jail. But you've mentioned now your relationship with your wife. And interestingly, you met your wife while you were in jail. Can you just talk us through this?
Oh, okay. Yeah, standard love story. Guy meets girl in prison. But as I see that picture, obviously one could wonder, well, how did you take that picture inside your prison cell? I had a contraband cell phone. I believe that all of you and perhaps all of the audience, it could be kind of hard to live without your cell phone. So same thing with me, even more so because I could go inside my cell and have access to freedom, to the free world from my jail cell. So it kind of allowed me to see outside my particular boundaries and borders and see what I was missing, and also see what could be. And part of that was me. I had an Instagram account because, again, if you're in prison, why not have an Instagram account? So I had an Instagram account, and I was scrolling for Star of David hashtags, right? Just randomly came to my mind. It's late at night, and I Star of David. And then I clicked on a picture of Star of David, and I see the woman that would be my wife standing standing in front of a picture of the flag of Israel, and I was like, wow, who's this? And we just I just followed her on Instagram. She followed me back, and that was it. It wasn't anything. There wasn't, like flirting or anything like that. That was what it was. And then like 6 months later, we started kind of liking each other's pictures more. And next thing you know, we had a conversation. And I talked to her that same day, and literally within that week, we were a couple. We were together, and about whenever we got the thing situated, she started visiting me she'd fly in from Vancouver. And visit me in California prison. She stayed with my mom and my sisters, and they drive up to see me. And I just fell in love with this woman. She touched me in a way and spoke to me in a way that I've never had before, never experienced. And she's just such an amazing woman. Her strength and everything, it just really touched me. And she had a 3-year-old daughter at the time. And I've never really been around children. As you can imagine, I had been down this was 2014. I met her in 2014. So I was arrested in 2002. So I hadn't been around children. So to me, to interact, because I had my phone and we're, video chatting, we're Skyping at the time, to interact with her daughter, it was amazing. So it just was amazing. And to be able to do that while I was locked up in prison, it meant a lot to me. And so she would visit me once a year. She would fly up and see me once a year. And I believe so a law changed. It was called the Youth Offender Bill, which allowed for people that were, that the offense was committed under the age of 23 to be evaluated for early parole. And that was based on science's understanding of the brain and the juvenile development of the brain and understanding of consequences. So you were eligible for early release. So there was a possibility I would be getting released early, and we were discussing that. And unfortunately, we didn't make the best choices. We ended up having a child while I was in prison, and that child, Zidan Mordechai Lev, was born in 2017. And this was prior to me out. So I was still in prison. So obviously, I'm conflicted about that in a way. First of all, my son, so adorable. Love him so much. A miracle to be born while I was locked up, with the mother in Vancouver and us meeting on Instagram. Like, this is, it's the way the events transpired is kind of amazing. But also, at the end of the day, I just wasn't being responsible either. I was still in prison, even though I felt like I was going to be released earlier. So that's where those ambivalent feelings or conflicted feelings I have about the whole scenario. Fortunately, I'm out, and I was out before he reached the age of 1. I was out. So fortunately for that. But yeah, that's our story in a nutshell. We ended up getting married after I paroled in 2018. I paroled. I don't want to skip certain events. There was that whole conversion that took place, but we did eventually get married. And I don't know about happily ever after, but we are because there's still struggles in starting your life over from scratch, essentially. But we are working on our happily ever after, and there is no person in this world that I believe I could possibly be happily ever after with than my wife, Lauren Ariella.
Yehudah, we want to actually go back in time and then come back to this point that you just made now, and that's really to your finding Judaism. But before we go to finding Judaism, perhaps you can answer this question. Your daily life in prison, your routine, your other relationships in prison, at what point in time did your daily life routines, relationships with other people, something happened? Because I can only assume growing up that Judaism wasn't part of your formative years. Is that correct, Yehudah?
Yeah.
You had no exposure whatsoever to Judaism.
No exposure whatsoever.
Nothing. So your daily life in prison, you were sentenced to 24 years. You did things in the prison. You, I suppose, had a job or whatever. But then something happened. You got exposed to Judaism. You don't just wake up in the morning with no exposure and say, right, I'm now going to be Jewish. That doesn't happen to anybody.
Yeah, didn't happen to a lot of Black people in prison either. So that wasn't necessarily the religion you would assume that I would be attracted to or be feel connected to in any way. So you're right. So I was raised nominally Christian, and I would say nominally my mother. So my mother was born and raised as a Muslim. She converted to Christianity in America. So my household was nominally Christian, and I say that in that on the certain holidays we would go there. It was very irregular, though there might be different spurts about it. But there was no real talks about like JC specifically. It was kind of just general God, and so I would, when my dad would take me to the services, we would show up late and sit in the back so we could leave early and nobody would say anything. So that was pretty much my relationship. But when I got arrested, I said, you know what? If I'm thinking about my eternal soul, or this, I guess my belief system had this connected to eternity, or what I think about eternity, I should probably know a little bit about it. So I started studying it, and through my studies, to each his own, I definitely could not do it anymore. And if anything, I was against religion in general. Not like you shouldn't be religious. I wasn't an atheist, but I was agnostic. Did God exist or not? There's no way of really knowing. So, I think I could come up with a better way to live my life than these antiquated scriptures. And so I was against religion in a certain sense. And I used to argue against other people's religion because, again, I came in a confrontational environment, which is prison. And I guess I was a little bit of a jerk too, right? Because who cares what somebody believes? If it's bringing them happiness and contentment, go for it. But I wasn't Jewish at the time, so I didn't necessarily have approach to religion. And so what happened was a Reform rabbi actually came to Pelican Bay to start there as a job. And somebody told me, like, yeah, come here and argue with the rabbi, show him this, and that. It was definitely, I didn't have the greatest motives for approaching that rabbi at all. And I approached him and I grilled him and I questioned him. And the way he answered me was kind of, it was kind of amazing and something that I just wasn't used to. And he essentially said, yeah, Judaism doesn't work for everybody. It works for the Jewish people. And you could look at history, it's worked for us. So that kind of took me back, like, okay, that's it. There's no hard sell. There's no hard pitch. So seeing that, I was like, okay, let me read about this Judaism that you don't want to push on me, like, let me read about this. And again, I had heard about Judaism through the lens of other people. I've read the Quran front to back, and it wasn't because I was interested in practicing Islam, but it was more of my academic curiosity about religion in general. So I read the Quran front to back. I had read the Catholic study Bible. I had read all sorts of different things. And I'm like, what I hear about what the Jewish people think and what they are about through every other religion, it makes more sense to hear it from Jews themselves. And so the rabbi there would give me books on Judaism, and every day or two I'd read a book, because again, when you're in your jail cell for usually most of the day, it's a maximum security prison, so you go to a yard for maybe an hour a couple times out the week, but there's lockdowns where you're in your cell for like maybe 4 months. They'll let you out for a 15-minute shower every 3 days or whatnot. So, so I had a lot of time to do a lot of self-reflection of who I wanted to be and what mattered. And I think with Judaism, I think when you ask for an explanation about what brought me to it, it's post facto reasoning, because I think initially it was that intuitive draw, a connection to Judaism that I can't explain. And then I kind of just use my logic to try to break down that particular feeling. But I felt drawn to it. It's emes, it's truth, and I started going down this journey. And then after I left Pelican Bay, I ended up being what they call the Jewish chapel lead clerk. When I went to another prison it was a Reform rabbi at the time. But what he did is he gave me Rabbi Lon Moskowitz gave me access to the Jewish library there. So he allowed me to order books and whatever I thought needed. And so that's how I started feeling connected to Orthodoxy, just reading books. That's how I did it. So it was weird because I didn't have access to a Jewish community in the traditional sense, of what your shul is probably like, and the shul Beth Jacob Irvine is like. I had no access to that, but that truth, that emes that I read in these books, it articulated itself to me in a way that I felt what it meant to be Jewish in a certain sense, and I wanted to be Jewish. And so that's what I did. I was rapping to fill in Don and Talus's in front of skinheads walking around with swastikas on them. I decided, you know what? I want to be a Jew. And even though I can't convert while I'm in prison, this journey started in 2010. I can't convert while I'm in prison. Nonetheless, I can try at least. And, baby steps. I didn't do it perfectly, but I tried to. And I worked myself to this point, and I ended up contacting Rabbi Senior at Beth Jacob Irvine when I was in prison. And he told me, you know what? When you get out of jail, the community would love to have you. And so that was kind of my entryway into Judaism from prison to the free world.
A couple of points have come up just from the floor. A question that has come up again and again: was your wife Jewish from birth, or did she? Yeah.
My wife was Jewish from birth. She was raised from her brother's doing a 10-year smicha program. Her dad was the chef at the Havetz Chaim Yeshiva. So yeah, she has definitely that sort of background. Like me, she had her rebellious streaks, but Baruch Hashem, we're building a nice observant from home right now.
And before you met her, those 12 years in prison, was the environment conducive to looking for religion, finding religion? What was the general mood in relation to religion in the prison?
Well, I mean, so in a certain sense, people, you could find a certain community within the Christian community or the Islamic community because it tended to be more robust. So you finding religion, you would actually have a lot more people to a sort of community of sorts in there, right? So you have that ability to have self-reflection because you're in your cell most of the time, and then to have that community that are attempting to do better in a certain sense. It was there. For a Jew, it's a different dynamic, and it's so if somebody presents as white, as a lot of Jews did in California prisons, the people that were in charge of the racial groups of whites tended to be racist skinheads, right? And so a lot of Jews had to hide their identity, especially when you're dealing with these maximum security prisons. Lower levels you get, the more open people could be about it. It wasn't as much of an issue. So I think less so for Jews. It was harder for Jews to find that sort of spirituality. In general, any sort of alone time and being alone with oneself and thoughts and having no real distractions, no pursuit of instant gratification or worldly pursuits that can keep you distracted. I think it's conducive to religious growth if you choose to do it. Though I would say Jewish religious growth is a lot harder depending on what prison you're in.
Yehudah, two questions from the floor, following on exactly from what you've just talked now about the whites and racism and all of that. A question from the floor: did you yourself experience anti-Semitism in prison?
Yeah. So it was a mixture. I don't want to paint it all one way or the other, but the anti-Semitism I experienced came specifically like from blacks in my environment. And again, it's because everything is super racialized, right? So to see me, the Jewish chapel lead clerk, associating with people who again didn't present as black, and they didn't really differentiate between Jewish and white. They just seen everything as white. So there were those people, and again, I would say they were in the minority. But the minority happened. Well, I mean, yeah, they were in the minority, but I definitely got comments of where my loyalty lied at. And you could imagine, even when I told you about my identity growing up, that could have been a problem to me. Like that could have, activated some certain feelings, unresolved feelings. But I was steadfast in like, you know what? Perhaps I don't know if they're going to accept me when I get out of jail, right? It's not because I'm black or anything, but because I'm a convicted felon. But you know what? This is truth, and at the end of the day, it's my relationship with Hashem that matters. And if I'm walking in that truth, then however somebody feels about me, that's more of their issue than it's mine.
Thank you, Yehudah.
Yehudah, that's truly amazing perspective. How did you manage to get to filling in prison?
Oh, so they allowed for you to have certain religious items. So I ordered it. I don't know, was it ajudaica.com? One of these places. Looked at it with my contraband cell phone and said, "Oh, okay, I want these particular to fill in." I ordered it. Though I would say too, though we have an organization in California. It operates all over the USA, but the Aleph Institute really was supportive of Jews in general that were incarcerated. They would, for any of the Yom Tov, whatever it was, they would supply food, Seder plates. If you needed to fill it and you couldn't afford it, they pay for that. Same thing with the Talis, correspondence courses. They would send your kid to Jewish camp. So they were very supportive in general. And if they didn't necessarily support me, I wasn't Jewish at the time. They supported the community, and I was able to facilitate that as the Jewish chapel lead clerk. And so, just to give you a little breakdown of that, of my duties was to run a lot of the Jewish programs at the behest of the rabbi. So I was able to teach what I believe is the only Zionism course in California State Prison, but I was able to do Zionism 101 and other Jewish enrichment programs, courses in there. But they allowed us to practice our religion. They allowed us to have religious items, and me being able to practice my religion allowed me to be free in a certain sense.
Amazing. And how did you find your way to orthodoxy over reform?
So, I mean, reform allowed me in the door, as in I was still allowed to be a very skeptical. I was allowed to be very skeptical because that was my normal nature. So it let me in the door. And my first exposure to orthodoxy, at least exposure in the sense that I'm just reading it through books, I'm like, they're too punctilious. That's just too much. And so I'm like, yeah, it rubbed me the wrong way. But then, I started thinking more about concepts and looking at the Jewish experience. First of all, when we're speaking about Judaism, orthodoxy is what kept the Jewish people alive, right? That's the only form of Judaism up until essentially, the 1800s sorts, right? Orthodoxy kept the Jewish people alive. It is what Judaism is about. And so to recognize that truth and recognize the Jewish experience, history is the greatest evidence of the veracity of orthodoxy. The Jewish people should not be here. There should be no modern state of Israel. There shouldn't be these flourishing Jewish communities in Irvine, California, in South Africa. We are as a people because of the connection to Orthodox Judaism. It's the only form of Judaism growing. And so I would actually break it down specifically, though, when we're talking about concepts of Hashem, concepts of God, that if there is a God, it makes sense to try to do his will to the best of our ability and not necessarily use reasoning to our own logic to create Chas v'Shalom, God in our own image of what our own wants are or what our own feelings are. And I think that orthodoxy captures the best essence, and I believe it's the truth. And I believe again that the evidence of Jewish history speaks to that truth. And I will close with this: that I believe an atheist or a reformed or anybody can live a moral life that is more moral than maybe you're an Orthodox Jew if he or she is not practicing a certain way. But now I would say, though, to live life to the highest moral in the highest moral ethical framework possible, and then pass that on to your family, your community, and then generationally, I think the only framework that can be done is Orthodox Judaism if we're speaking about denominations of Judaism. And so that appealed to me. And again, I got that not from being in an Orthodox Jewish community. Being in an Orthodox Jewish community made me realize that, everything I read was, this is true. This is emes. This is what it is. And I experienced that, especially from my experience with the Beth Jacob community in Irvine.
Amazing. A couple of questions came in relating to specific books that may have been a source of inspiration. Briefly, were there any specific books that stand out as helpful influences to you over the time?
And so, I mean, there were some basic books when I first started, To Be a Jew, 9 questions people ask about Judaism. These were like some of the basic books. And then I just got into reading, whether it was, the Rashi, the what may be the Shulchan Aruch, what may be considered like technical and not as fun as other things. But once I realized what Judaism was, and I read books on Jewish history, there was so many books I read, and I read it at a rate which was essentially, one book every 1 to 2 days. So there was so many that I couldn't just pick one out like that. But it was a lot of just me trying to learn all the nuts and bolts of what being Jewish was, and so that caused me to kind of diffuse my studies around all that was available.
Yehudah, we've got a heap load of questions from the floor. And just to remind our viewers, please keep the questions coming in. We are going to make every attempt to answer certainly most of the questions. I'm not sure we're going to get to all of the questions, but we are certainly going to try and get to them. Yehudah, I must just say that we'll be getting some very, very, very positive feedback from one of the Rebbitzins in Johannesburg. Thank you for your inspiration. May Hashem bless you and your family with his richest blessings. So, Yehudah, I think that already we are achieving what we want to achieve, what the Rabbi said right at the beginning, and that is for this to be an inspirational series. Yehudah, we've talked for 45 minutes on your life in prison. We still have a bit of time, but I do want to cover your life outside of prison. Is there anything further that we have not dealt with that you feel that our audience should know about? This point in time, it's still Yehudah Pryce in prison, or do you feel it's the right time now to move to life outside of prison?
I like life outside of prison, so I'll always use that way to go outside of prison.
Right, wonderful. We like you outside of prison too, Yehudah. Okay, Yehudah, we've got some really, really nice pictures which you've sent us for the program, so I'm just going to ask Moshe to put some of them up. You got out of prison, and let's just talk first. Your conversion. Questions from the audience. How and when did you convert? Maybe you also want to talk about, we've got some pictures of you over here, about your marriage, and just basically the change from Omar Pryce to Yehudah Pryce.
Okay, yeah. So I paroled early. So I did a little bit over 16 years because of that new law that I said passed. So I paroled early. I didn't have to do the full 24 years. I was released in October, the end of October of 2018. And I think the first week I was out, I contacted Rabbi Senior from Beth Jacob of Irvine. And I told him, look, I'm out. This is my situation. And he's like, all right, well, as soon as you could come over here, I was at a halfway house in Los Angeles. And he's like, as soon as you could come over here, you're welcome. And so I would drive and try to, catch Shacharis. I had to drive from LA to Orange County and catch it when I can. And I started experiencing Beth Jacob. And it was just a wonderful community. And I'm sure, there's it was founded by, there's a lot of South Africans that founded it. So there's that population here. And everybody, though, at Beth Jacob has been so welcoming. And I think when we're talking about if I am a success story in any sense, it's connected to what the community has done for me. I wasn't used to people randomly inviting me to dinners in their house with their family for Shabbos dinners. So I'm going to people's houses and just experiencing like healthy family dynamics and what it meant, the Jewish communal experience that I only gleaned from books I read. I was actually experiencing it. And I wrote an article for Pesach in prison for the Jewish Journal out here. And so my story kind of was out there. So people kind of knew my background too. And again, at the time, I'm not Jewish. Me and my wife at the time, we were going through a rough patch. It was from jail. It was more from jail, not from when I got released, but that rough patch was still carrying out. So nobody in the community outside the Rabbi Senior and a few other people knew about like my wife and so they were just doing it because of me. It wasn't like, oh, we like your wife or something like that, or we like your son. It was just genuinely caring and being open to me, and so that really affected me. And I think when you feel responsible to a community, it just makes you more responsible in life, and it makes you it makes you live more with a purpose when, it's not just an abstract conception of what Hashem is, right? Because it's kind of hard to fully wrap your mind around what Hashem, what God is. But having a community that brings God into it and allows you to experience that, it was a beautiful thing. So I went through my conversion program. I threw in my application. I got out in the end of October, like October 22nd. I believe I submitted it in November of 2018, and I had my first meeting with Rabbi Union of the Rabbinical Council of California in December, and that's what of 2018. That's what started my conversion program. And I finished the process in June of 2020. That's when I finished. It was kind of, there was a little snag, a delay. COVID happened, so we had to figure out some of the logistics of having that final test meeting. But yeah, so I'm a fresh Jew as of 2020 June, but it feels like it's an indescribable feeling to be on this path for almost a decade. 2010 when I was exposed, never being fully to actualize who your identity was or is, and being able to do that now. It's an amazing feeling to be a Jew, and I'm very proud of being a Jew.
Very special indeed. The two questions I want to focus on for a moment, just the one you have answered, but I want to ask it more directly, and that is the reaction of the Jewish community to you joining them, and the reaction of the Jewish community in relation to the process of converting. Do you feel any alienation? Was there any feeling of alienation along the way?
I never felt any feeling of alienation. And just to kind of like drive home my point, I didn't know anybody in Irvine. I just picked up, I'm like, okay, we have a shul in Irvine. He wrote back to me while I was in jail, so I'm going there to do the conversion. And somebody from my community, Lee Weissman, rented a room to me. And again, he knew, I was in jail for, over 16 years, sentenced to 24 years, fresh out of jail. I was still on parole. When I went to the Beis Din, I was on parole. They knew about it. The Beis Din knew everything about what was going on, but my community did too. And Lee Weissman said, all right, rent a room. And just imagine somebody, and I'm tattooed up. I have tattoos all over my arm. You've seen the picture. And I'm coming and knowing where I'm coming from and to take a chance on me. And then he ended up just renting out the whole house to my family. So, I mean, that's the type of love and acceptance I got here. I get people that call in all the time. How are you doing? What's going on? Wanting to help. And I personally didn't face any alienation, but the Irvine community, I think it's unique. We have a lot of different converts from different backgrounds. It might be Mexican, Guatemalan, Chinese. We have whole African-American families. So I think it's unique in that it builds this environment that's conducive to acceptance. Like, at the end of the day, you're a Jew, and that's what matters, and we're going to treat you, like you are one of us. And that's what I felt like. And it's been vital in my ability to get off parole, to start my family. And my wife is absolutely amazed with Irvine. So is my daughter. My son, I don't know if he's amazed as it yet. He's still young, but I think he will be when he's cognizant of how great a community this is.
Amazing. So wonderful to hear. And from a perspective of your family, and from your friends, both in prison and before prison, what has the reaction been to this major decision?
So I would say my family's supportive. A lot of people don't necessarily know what Judaism is from the outside, right? But they've been super supportive, and even people in prison that I'm still in contact with were like, hey, you know what? You weren't just, because there is that stereotype of people just get religion while they're in jail. They get religious and then they get out and then they go back to doing whatever they're doing. because it was kind of like a coping mechanism of sorts, to attach yourself to religion and God. But they're super supportive. Like, look, you said you were going to do this, and you did. And yeah, they've been supportive. Then also the other things I did too, right? I got out of jail. I got my bachelor's, my master's, and now I'm doing my doctoral degree. And so all that went together as far as me just being like productive and not defined by the mistakes and poor choices that I made when I was a teenager.
Wonderful. Yehudah, the one thing myself, yourself, and the rabbi have in common, other than the three of us being Jews, is it's very, very important to keep our mothers-in-law happy. And we're delighted that your mother-in-law, Lisa, is on the call. Welcome, Lisa. Hope you're enjoying the show. We've got a comment from Lisa and a question, and because it's your mother-in-law, Yehudah, we have to fit her in. We don't have a choice, even though there's a heap of others that are not going to be attended. But this is, the three of us know what we're talking about here. Is that right, Rabbi? So just from what your proud mother-in-law, first my question, I'd want to say with pride that I'm Yehudah's mother-in-law, Lauren Ariella's mother. So Lisa, we're also very, very proud to have Yehudah with us on the show. The question from your mother-in-law, Yehudah, is, were there other Jewish prisoners, or were there people like you, searching for answers?
There was other Jewish prisoners. I may have ran across one person that was like Orthodox. A lot of people were just had exposure to Judaism, maybe a little bit, but they wanted a sort of sanctuary where they felt comfortable, and they would go to the Jewish chapel. That's what it was called, the Jewish chapel. So there were other Jews. It wasn't necessarily like a super religious or community, but nonetheless there was, and we did the Pesach Seders, we did Yom Tov, and we celebrated as a Jewish community, and that was the Jewish community that I knew, and to know people and their struggles and everything they've been through that led them to where they're at, it gave me a deeper appreciation of the human condition, and so yes, that's what was the community. That's what it looked like.
Amazing. What's your life like now in terms of making a living, day-to-day living, etc.? Life after prison?
Life after prison is good. I have a great mother-in-law. I didn't want to let that go away. So that makes things, when your mother-in-law likes you, right? That makes things a lot better, a lot smoother. My life, so I mentioned a little bit earlier. So I figured when I was in prison, I said, like, what can I do where my life experience can be used as an asset to try to maybe affect change and affect people to not go down this path I went down. And I remember encountering social workers and not trusting them when I was a kid, because I felt like they were just agents of the state, and whatever I said would be used against me. So I knew there was that trust factor. And if I could use my own personal experience to kind of connect with people, and then that might be beneficial. So I said, I want to be a social worker. So I got out of jail. I was about 21 units shy of that. I did my 21 units the first semester I was out, and I graduated with my bachelor's in sociology with an emphasis in social welfare. I immediately applied to the University of Southern California social work program, I got my master's. And right now I'm doing my doctoral degree at Simmons University, doctorate in social work. And I'm a therapist psychotherapist at Beit Shuva, which is a residential addiction treatment center. And so I have clients there, that have gone down similar paths as me, or dealing with drugs, a lot of Jewish individuals there. And so I want to be a therapist. I'm doing the hours now because I'm now a registered associate clinical social worker in the state of California. I'm doing my hours to become a licensed clinical social worker. I want to be a psychotherapist, among other things that I'm doing. And I also, I just started a job on Monday, which is with a young adult court in Orange County. And I'm dealing with people who have been incarcerated. And if they graduate this program, which is like 18 months to 2 years, they can get the felony removed from their record. So I'm working with the DA, public defender's office, the judge, and I'm hoping to increase public safety and, keep families, unified and try to affect change in any way that I can. It's part of my shuva.
Yehudah, we got a question now from a very dear friend of both the rabbi and mine, Rabbi Yehudah Aharon from London. Welcome, Yehudah. And Yehudah asks the question, it's an obvious question, what made you choose the name Yehudah? Open brackets, awesome choice, by the way.
Well, it is. I mean, Yehudah was such a strong leader, right? And I'm thinking about what I have to be able to lead my family, especially coming back from what I came back from. Yehudah also made some questionable decisions, and I kind of relate to the fact that some of the decisions that we make are not the perfect ones, but there's redemption if we choose to hold on strong to our Yiddishkeit. And Yehudah seems to me so inconspicuously, I would say, yeah, I wanted to be conspicuously Jewish. All right, I want, when you say my name, I want you to recognize that it's this Yiddishkeit that I'm connected to, and I'm even going through the whole legal process of changing my name and everything, because to me, I'm a changed person now, and I think Yehudah, the lion, kind of exemplifies that, and that's what I feel connected to. And again, I would also say too that I think this is ex post facto logic, justifying that intuitive sense I got in attraction to this particular name.
Wonderful. Yehudah, again, comments coming through here. Wow, this man is totally inspirational. What an example of what can be done. Well done. And as we look through the program over here, Yehudah, we can see pictures of really, we started off with your first picture you sent was yourself in the prison cell, and now we're seeing the ultimate, the happiness where you're starting. You've got, this is the pictures of your married life, and you've obviously made a tremendous success of what you have. The comments are coming in thick and fast here. Got another comment. Yehudah, you're a remarkable human. Kol hakavod to you for the way you've turned your life around and the meaningful work that you do. And I think, Yehudah, it's now probably time, to can start wrapping things up. For myself and the rabbi, thank you. The last question that we'd like to ask, or that I'd like to ask, and then I'd like to hand it over to the rabbi for final questioning, and then we will thank you, Yehudah, is South Africa is in a tough spot as we speak. COVID has hit this the wider South African community, not just the Jewish community, very, very hard. You've come out of adversity. We've seen pictures, as I've just said now, of yourself in jail, of yourself at the pinnacle of happiness coming out of the wedding. Do you have a message for the South African Jewish community, or the wider South African community, based on your personal experiences in life?
Yeah. So in two parts. One, I would say that never judge, and this goes out to your community or any community and people in general, never judge a person by the worst choices they made in life, right? That there's something special and holy in people's soul that and that's what you should try to connect with. And that's what you should always judge people favorably. And you will never necessarily know what they've been through to get in the position they are. Even if they rub you the wrong way, even if you don't condone actions or political ideologies or whatever it is, judge people favorably, judge people how you would want to be judged. And remember that Hashem doesn't just operate off of strict justice. There's that mercy. And so we should act in a way that we would want Hashem to deal with us. So general. Now dealing with adversity, struggle, especially in this COVID times, everybody's going through it in a certain degree. And just from my own experience, that redemption comes in a blink of the eye. I think if we stay true to our values, who we are, who our ancestors have been, and who we want to be through it all, we can have such a substantial impact on the people around us, our community, and hopefully to a greater extent, the world in a certain extent. And I would also say that one should set goals for themselves, no matter how bleak the situation looks, and just pursue them. We have one life to live. And if you can pursue your goals, and if your goals are connected to you wanting to not just better yourself and better your family and better your community, better the world, if your goals are connected to that, that's something worthy of pursuit. And I think to do that will go a long way in healing a lot of the divides that we have in this world. And I will end with, I think empathy is the key. Is being empathetic. Understanding empathy is the key to things, and not writing out the chance that somebody has to change their life around and change for the better. So I gave you a little 3 different things and I mixed it together, but those are the messages I have in general and specifically to the South African community. I feel a little connection to the South African community, more so because I'm from Beth Jacob. We have a South African population here. I'm doing an online yeshiva siyun halacha, and the person teaching me Hilchos Shabbos there is Harav David Astra, and he was born in Johannesburg. So I definitely feel a connection to South Africa, and hopefully I could travel there at some point in time.
Well, absolutely. Well, Yehudah, as we said before the show, you are now part of the base community as well. So now you've got a connection. You're now a member of the South African Shul as well. So welcome to our latest and newest recruit.
I hope I don't have to pay membership dues. All right.
You don't have to pay. For you, we're waiving membership. Membership. Yehudah, before I pass over to the Rabbi for final comments and thank yous, it's been my absolute pleasure and delight in chatting to you. Once again, a big thank you for appearing on short notice, so willingly to appear on our show. It's been absolutely inspirational. It's a life lesson, and I think whoever has been fortunate and privileged to listen to your message will remember your message for their lives. And my final comment is that Hashem should bless you and your entire family with much bracha always, and give you the strength to carry on doing what you're doing, and be truly a light unto all the nations, and to just keep going being the inspiration that you are. Yehudah, thank you very, very much.
Amen. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate you all and all the work that you're doing to bring stories like me for people to hear, because I think people need to hear stories like this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yehudah. Rabbi?
Yehudah, thank you very much. Just very briefly, there have been so many comments, so many questions. It's such a pity that we actually have to call it. And who knows, maybe we'll have you as a guest again online. Certainly, we look forward to welcoming you in person together with your family, and hopefully that happens soon. But to conclude for this evening, thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity. It's deeply appreciated, both on a personal note and certainly on behalf of our community. Please God, we get to meet in person really soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rabbi, for having me. Yes, I look forward to meeting you all. Be'ezrat Hashem, it'll be soon.
Before we conclude formally, to say thank you again to Robert, even though he does not enjoy me saying thank you, I want to say thank you to him once again. And I also want to say thank you to my dear brother Moshe behind the scenes for really helping to facilitate these webinars. We really could not do this without him, and it's greatly appreciated. I hope everyone is safe, keep healthy, and hope to see you all again really soon.